Hello and welcome to Algebra 1, Chapter 1.4, and today we're going to discuss identity and equality properties. So our goals for this section are that you're going to be able to recognize and use identity and equality properties. So the way I remember identity properties is that you have an identity and your identity never changes, right? You are who you are your whole life. So if we're looking at the identity for a number, we have two identity properties. For multiplication, what can I add to a number and not change the number? I can add 0. So the additive identity is 0. If I add 0 to a number, I keep that number. Multiplicative identity is what can I multiply a number by and not change the number, and that is 1. So if I multiply a number by 1, the number stays the same. So I want the number to stay the same. That is your identity. A few just multiplicative properties. Multiplicative property of 0, what happens if you multiply anything by 0? You get 0. And probably a little more importantly is what happens if you multiply by the inverse or the reciprocal. So if you remember the reciprocal, so if I start out with 2/3, if I multiply by the reciprocal, which is 3/2, remember you flip it to have a reciprocal. If I multiply straight across, I get 6/6, which is 1. So it's two numbers whose product is 1. So these are called reciprocals of each other or multiplicative inverses. They mean the same thing. It's just when you get 1 when you multiply those together. Sorry, this says inverses. Okay, so multiplying by reciprocal gets to be really important when you are solving equations. So make sure you have that one down and understand anytime you take a number times its reciprocal. And if we cross out before we multiply, we can see a little more y here. Those become 1s and 1s, and you get 1. This just puts it all on one page, not that you have to write down anything else, but multiplicative identity, you're going to multiply by 1. So notice those symbols there. Multiplicative property is 0. If you multiply by 0, you get 0. And then multiplicative inverse, if you multiply by an inverse, you get 1. So either we're keeping the number, we're getting 0, or we're getting 1. Those are our three multiplication identities, or multiplication properties, I should say. So this says find the value of n, then name the property that it's used. So what does n have to be for us to multiply n times 12 and get 0? N has to be 0. And so if I multiplied by 0, what property did I use? We're going to call it the multiplication property of 0. Okay, so what is n, and then what property would that be? So if n times 1/5 is 1, what does n have to be? Can't be 0, can't be 1/5, can't be 1. How about 5? 5 times 1/5, and if we reduce before we multiply, we get 1. All right, so if I take 5 times 1/5, what property is that? That's multiplicative inverse multiplied by the inverse. All right, so 28 times n equals 0. What does n have to be? N has to be 0. Okay, and then what property is that? It's that multiplicative property of 0. Very good. All right, one other thing I want us to look at. Now, unfortunately, I didn't leave you any room to write these, but you might at least read them if you want to jot them down over to the side someplace. These are all properties that you use really all the time, and it's good for us to know which properties we're using. Reflexive property just says anything is equal to itself. So examples over here, 7 equals 7, 2 plus 3 equals 2 plus 3, anything equals itself. Symmetric property says that we can switch the order. So this one you use, if you solve an equation and you get to the end and you have 3 equals x, and you want x on the left-hand side and you switch it to x equals 3, that's that property. So you're using that property, and so it's a good thing to know you're actually using a property. You should never do something that there's not a property that says you can't do it. So x equals 3, 3 equals x, that's the symmetric property. You switch the entire equation around. Transitive is kind of like a 3-step process. So if you know x plus 3 equals 5, and you know x equals 2, then what we have is 2 plus 3 equals 5. Okay, so you kind of stair-step your way there. And you should know substitution, right? To substitute, you're going to replace a value with a known value, hopefully. And so that is substitution. All right, we are going to finish those last 2 examples in class next time. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.